My name is Clark Aldrich, and I'm going to be talking about two things today. We're talking about heroic learning and then short sims. So heroic learning, as the introduction, is a new way of thinking about learning. It's actually a very old way of thinking about learning, but it's what a lot of organizations are starting to think about. Um, so thank you for this opportunity. It's the first time ever I've been talking about this stuff. I've been researching it for about a year now. So thank you for being the perfect test audience. So I think we are all on a hero's journey to transform learning and education. So I think everyone here is aligned, I think, with saying we really want to make education better than it is today. So I think it's very exciting to be here and talking to this group. So there's a really important question, and I think a lot of instructional design conversations are all around how do we teach strangers, how do we teach other people, and sort of in as efficiently as possible. But a lot of organizations that I've been talking to at a fairly senior level ask the question, how can organizations attract, keep, create, and then use their heroes, their best of their best? How do we supercharge the best employees, and how do we attract the best employees? And I want to present the principles of heroic learning, but I also want to put it in terms of how do you learn stuff that matters? How do you, as individuals, we're all a bunch of individuals listening to and thinking about this content. So I want to ask you all, how do you learn the stuff that matters, the stuff that's truly defined you? So I'm going to start off with the first principle, which is you are on a hero's journey. You are a hero on a journey. And well, what does that mean? So you want to do good in the world. Everyone who's on this conversation wants to make the world a better place, which is pretty amazing. And that's the starting point of heroic learning. All the significant achievements you had in your entire life have all followed a version of the hero's journey. I think most of you know what that is. It starts off with making the decision to do something amazing, uh, jumping into the unknown, hopefully finding a mentor to help you, teaming up with other people, coming up with all kinds of solutions to all kinds of challenges, and then eventually, hopefully, facing off the biggest challenge of all, and ultimately kind of overcoming ourselves and our own fears, as well as some big external challenge, and then getting there. So I think this framework of a hero's journey is the fundamental one of all of our growth, all of our learning, all of our work experiences. Another thing I'm going to suggest about you is that you do want to find your calling in life. Why are you here? What is the point of your existence? And at the end of the day, at the end of the month, at the end of the year, what makes for a great year? So as you do find your callings, what you're good at, what your talents are, because we all have very specific talents, we all have very specific passions, and our dream is to bring those two together in a sustaining way. What we're good at, what we care about together to make us money and to deliver value to the world. As you find your callings, you actually level up. Our callings never stand still. Once we achieve our callings, we level up. And then we start revealing new higher level callings. That's how we grow. It's an ongoing process. So you value anything that helps you move along the journey that you're on. Anything. So we think about learning and stuff like this, of course. We think about work. You get up in the morning and you get work done, but there's also playing and contacts that we make. Sometimes the contacts that we make can be the most transformative thing that we do all week or all month. We learn, we find out about someone and they find out about us. Tools, a new piece of software can unlock another part of your own hero's journey. Recipes, culture, being in the right culture, being around other people who motivate you, who excite you. Feedback, getting the right feedback from people is absolutely critical. Anything that helps you make progress is heroic learning. We have to get away from this concept of learning being this thing, this thing you're looking at right now, this workbook, this page. It doesn't matter if it's the right person, if it's the right job opportunity, if it's right anything that helps you move from here to there on your individual hero's journey is heroic learning. And I think you also know, because again, we've been around for a while, we have some experience. We know how we make progress, or we know how you make progress on your journey. And one thing that's really, really important is you've learned you can't be forced to learn anything. You can't be forced to be creative. You can't be forced to be innovative. You need to be engaged. And important is really, really important. You have to believe in the importance of what you're doing. But also, by the way, fun isn't bad too. So, we can't always do important things, or we're not always engaged by important things. Sometimes it's absolutely fun to be engaged by fun things. Absolutely fine. Another thought, you learn primarily from your peers and online peers. At the end of the day, the week, the month, the year, you have learned the most from the people around you, not from the people who have power over you. Nor mandatory instruction. You may have done mandatory instructions. You may have been ordered to take things and forced to take things, or you don't get your bonus, or you can't move on, or whatever. Fair enough. But what you really learn from is your peers, including your online peers. So that is the fundamental context of your education, is your interactions with your peers. You have grown, and I like the word grow a lot more than learning, a lot more than working. I remember when, well, I don't remember when, but I remember when learning about Einstein's work about time and space, and sort of realizing that time and space were sort of two sides of the same coin, and we sort of coined the term space time. I think one of the huge problems we have right now is we've sort of separated out work and learning, or learning and working. I'm not going to mush the two together, because every version of that, it sounds horrible. But the notion of growing, it's like, how do the notion of growing is much more relevant than either working or learning. It's the combination of the two. And you've grown through commitments to group accomplishments, ideally months long. That's what matters. So if you look at your own life, and you sort of think about, where did I actually grow? Where did I become a more powerful person? It tends to be through group accomplishments. Again, probably a few months long. So we need to start rethinking, what does it mean to learn? What does it mean to work? And start breaking it up into 3 or 4, say 2 month long projects. That's how you've learned. Tough, stretch challenges with stakes that other people, especially your organization, values highly. So this notion of, how do we make progress on your journey? Also, what you're really learning through all this stuff is about 200 mental models. That's about all it is. It's not that many. It's about 200 mental models, which include how organizations and industries function, some professional skills, decision making, really important, self management, really, really important, and team management. So everything you're learning at the end of the day, by can't keep using end of the day, end of the year, end of the decade, whatever, the things that matter that you learn are really about 200 mental models that you're learning to apply, to combine, to refine in these areas. Again, how do organizations and industries function? Some professional skills, like how to put together a great course, some decision making, self management, and team management. And so it all comes down to that. And at the end of the day, if you're not making progress on these areas, you're probably not making progress at all. And you're also interested in some of the big questions. And whenever we think about growing, some of the big questions: what is the right industry for me? What is the role of my boss? Why am I here? How much time should I spend as a parent versus as an employee? How much time should I spend on independent thought versus working with my organization, for example? So these are, there's a lot of big questions. And any organization that wants to attract and create their heroes also has to create the opportunity for these conversations around some of the big questions. You want help and credit for what you accomplish, but you also are suspicious of authority. I think that's a reality too, is that no matter how much we talk about, organizations, we are all a little suspicious of our boss and what he or she wants from us and why. We're suspicious of our organizations. And ultimately, what we value, and what I think I'm going to suggest that you value, are guides not teachers and not bosses in terms of helping you learn and grow. So this concept of guides who are not people who have power over you is really important in schools, as well as in the workforce. There's only so much someone can teach you who has formal authority over you, but it's really the guides that allow feedback and conversations outside of the organization. The language of growth is Socratic dialogues, which mostly involves asking the right questions, and growth mindset praise, which is focusing on progress, on getting better, not in competing with each other, but are you better than who you were yesterday and better than who you were a week ago? Not necessarily on results or in addition to results. So this is the language of coaches, Socratic dialogues and growth mindset praises that should become much more of the franca lingua of heroic communities. What you do need help with, I'm going to suggest, and this is very personal, I'm sure, is you do need help developing good habits. You need to have your time protected in the morning so you can get some super focused work done. And you need to be able to do collaborative work in the afternoon when your brain is much better at doing collaborative work. So a lot of times what we want our bosses to do is to protect us from the noise of the organization, especially in the morning, technically about 2 hours after you wake up, when you're most able to learn, when you're the fastest learner, you're the most able to do a lot of the grindy work. By the way, the second time is around 3:30 or 4 in the afternoon, when you're also able to super focus and get a lot of work done. So this is how you build your good habits. And this is what, again, a good heroic organization does, is allow you to do this. You do need help organizing your tasks. And so a good coach can help you set up your tasks. You need the tools and the support of collaborating well. And you need the tools and support for learning leadership, and you need the opportunities to apply leadership. So that's what you need from your organization, is this kind of work, as opposed to being praised good or bad, or good job or bad job. It's this kind of guide work that you probably do need. You don't want your accomplishments to be tied to your relationship with your boss. So I think a huge problem that happens again in schools and certainly in corporations as well, as you get a lot of goodwill with one individual person. So you spend a lot of time building goodwill with a boss, and then that boss moves on and leaves, and suddenly all that goodwill goes away. You have to start from scratch. So what a lot of so in heroic communities, goodwill becomes something that is almost becomes like a Bitcoin. It becomes a transferable relationship, not something that has to do specifically with an individual person. Well, how do you do that? Well, one way is badges. So you want to be recognized in a transferable way through earning defined accomplishments such as badges, or other things that you can point to anyone and say, look at what I did. Isn't that great? Therefore, you should give me more power and authority. You do want ongoing feedback on your leadership growth. And a lot of organizations that are pursuing this heroic learning have ongoing 360 feedback relationships, not in a big, scary, summative way, but in much more of a formative way. Every single project, I want 360 feedback from people around me, and then using that not having my bonus being based on that, but having my growth opportunity being based on that. I can see where I'm strong. I can see where I'm weak. And again, this only works when you have a very high trust relationship, typically with a coach, not a boss. You want the time you spend on any project, whether it succeeds or not, you want to be recognized for the time you spend on the project, in part so that you can say, I worked really hard, therefore I'm not going to work this weekend. I'm not going to work. I'm going to take Monday off because I've been working really hard. So you want to be able to bank a lot of the efforts that you put into projects previously. You also want to produce great things in what I'm calling generative communities. And I think this is another really key aspect of heroic learning. You want to be a part of a tribe of others who also are tapping their inner heroes. You want to be like super friends. You want to have a group of people who are all committed to each other and committed to creating things of value that the organization wants you to create. This is also, these generative communities are also how you develop your identity. In these generative communities, you are the smart one, the funny one, the hardworking one, the great leader, whatever. And we all build our identities based on the generative communities, on the communities that are producing things uh, that we want. Ultimately, you want the community that you're part of to be self-directed. You want to have a voice in the leadership, and you want to take turns in a lot of cases being the leader of the generative communities in which you're producing. This notion of self-directed generative communities is sort of the whole essence of heroic learning. You also know that your progress of the generative community, your tribe, your heroic community, comes from balancing failures and successes and chaos and order. You don't expect it to be a smooth ride. And finally, in any true good heroic community, you have the ability through due process, do it fairly, to get rid of weak members, members who don't want to play the game. You want to have control over your community such that over time, you can phase out the people who don't want to be there, who don't want to play the same game that you want to play, but especially in a way that they can return. So you can, someone isn't in the mood to be a hero, isn't in the mood to work heroically. Well, great. Well, they can leave, and then give them a way of coming back if they want to. Last principle: when you're working, you're also working towards the future. And so, in a strong heroic community, you want apprentices to try new roles while you're there. And I think it's really important to realize that anyone who's working in an organization today is looking ahead towards the next job, and a smart organization is going to help anyone who's currently working find their next job, presumably in that organization, which includes apprenticeships and also tools and frameworks to secure that next opportunity. It is part of the role that you're in, is that you're seeking out the next role you want to be in. And that is a good thing, not a bad thing. That is part part and parcel of the role of the organization. So that's how you feed yourself, and that's how you feed your heroes in your organization. And increasingly, the roles of a lot of traditional learning people is going to be, how do we feed the heroes? How do we apply various versions of these 12 principles to empower and attract the heroes? Well, what are the stakes? So let's say you have a community, and let's say that your community has a few people who are not interested in being heroes, who are uninspired, who don't really want to push themselves hard. You have some people who are heroic, who who have identified their own internal passions, who see their role in the organization as applying and learning and growing heroically. And then you have some people who are on the fence, who could go either way. So that's the community almost always that you inherit. And I'm going to say pretty unequivocally that one hero is probably worth, this is a made up number, but 12 uninspired people. So the value of heroes to an organization is almost immeasurably, it is almost immeasurable. And when you talk to CEOs in corporations, they want the heroes. They say, how do we attract and keep these kinds of super people who are going to be creating the great innovations, who are going to be meeting customer needs, who are going to be finding new ways of doing things? So, given a community, if you do not feed the heroes, over time, your community will lose the heroes and gain more people to backfill that are the uninspired, that are the people who have not yet found their calling, not yet decided they want to follow their own hero's journey. And so over time, if you don't feed the heroes, you lose the heroes. And then you end up with an organization that's frankly fairly inert. But if you do feed the heroes, over time, you attract more heroes. There's a quote, any virtuoso only wants to work with other virtuosos. So if you feed the heroes in your community, you will be able to attract more heroes. Frankly, the people who are not interested in being heroes tend to leave. And a lot of the people who are on the fence, who could be heroics or not, find their inner hero and decide to become fairly amazing. And so this is the absolute brutal reality of heroic growing is how do we get more people? How do we attract more heroes? How do we feed the heroes to shift the amount of our organization to people who act heroically? So there's two sides of the coin. There's heroic learning, and heroic learning is anything that helps you make progress on your own individual hero's journey. How do you find your calling? How do you work towards it? And then ultimately, once you've achieved your calling, how do you find your next calling? How do you continue down this path? And then there's heroic communities, which are self-managing generative communities, communities that by and large are managed internally by people on the team, and that are producing great things. So if you look at organizations today, there are some heroes sprinkled around. There's a lot of people who are on the fence, and there's a lot of people who are basically not, who haven't found their inner heroes. And heroic communities are almost always where you find the heroes, whether it's a leadership team, self-managed, there are war rooms, there are critical projects. There's some supervision, but any good critical project ultimately is self-managed. There's super empowered teams, and there are definitely some heroes without a lot of power who hopefully will find their way into a heroic community. So most organizations, there are some heroes, and almost all the time, those heroes are in or have been or are going to be again in some form of heroic community, some self-managing, self-directing, generative communities. So heroic communities, self-organized generative communities, are generative in at least three different ways. Most importantly, for some organizations, they produce deliverables that are innovative, substantial, well aware of the industry in which they work, fast moving, and relatively cheap. Heroic communities are, funnily enough, very inexpensive because they don't have a high management cost because they're self-directing. So one output of heroic communities is obviously the deliverable. Another output of heroic communities is leveling up the heroes through servant. These people become servant leaders. They have great industry skills. They're all people who want to be there, who get up in the morning and want to show up, and also who become over time game masters. They become very good at motivating other people to want to play the game of work. Really important concept, the notion of the skill set of game masters. And the final thing that heroic communities generate, self-organizing generative communities generate, is accountability, scrappiness, proactiveness, less management, more heroes it attracts for the entire organization. The more heroic communities you have, the more they actually change the culture of the organization. And again, we have leadership teams, war rooms, critical projects, skunk works, empowered teams, as where most organizations have some form of self-organizing generative communities, and the goal is to have more. So as we start feeding the heroes, and as we start organizing our organizations into heroic communities, we start seeing organizations start off more like this. And by the way, robust interconnections, people who serve on multiple heroic communities, helps prevent the any kind of factionalization, any kind of faction. So it's a real power trip is as you're going down this path, having robust interconnections of tribes, not just single tribes. So you start getting rid of the people who don't want to be there, and you start encouraging and motivating all the other people to become their heroic selves. Over time, the goal is to flatten the organization, not completely, but more and more, and have everyone, again, increasingly acting heroically in multiple interconnected heroic communities. And by the way, in a lot of cases, your competitors are doing this, are building heroic communities, and you do not want to be competing against a team of heroes. How do you feed the heroes? Those are the 12 principles we talked about. And how do we make heroic communities increasingly the norm rather than what we're often doing, which is leaving them as the exception? Huge amount of content there, big download. Any thoughts or questions? You can type in questions.
So, Clark, I've been following the chat, and so far people have just been discussing together how much it is inspiring and how much they are in agreement with your pieces of advice. So I haven't really seen any questions so far, but I am sure that if we suggest the attendees to drop in their questions in the chat right now, considering that we have about 2-3 more minutes for the presentation and 5 more minutes for the questions and answers, they will come just right in time.
Let me zip off to short sims very quickly, and then we'll return again in just a few minutes, and we'll be able to talk about we'll have some Q&A about both categories. So part 2 of it is short sims, and I talked about this before, so so hopefully some of you have heard it before, but they're made using iSpring TalkMaster. Awesome tool. If you're not using iSpring TalkMaster, you should be. Short sims are how we pivot from a fact-based model of education to mental modes and mental models. It should be models. So short sims are how we get there. So, here's an example of sort of a typical short sim. Again, this is made using iSpring TalkMaster. It's a scenario. Here's a scenario on you like debating and you're getting good at debating. Over time, you can becoming very good at understanding arguments. So your debating skills rise. And again, this is just a typical short sim where it takes you through, in this case, what it's like to need deliberate practice. So this is a short sim on deliberate practice, on both using graphs and charts as well as ongoing situations to present to you, what it's like to apply deliberate practice. What are some of the tough decisions that you make around deliberate practice? What does it feel like to grow using deliberate practice? So this is one of those 200 mental models that it's really good to know about. Also, short sims can be good. Actually, let's skip over this one. So this is short sims can also be used on much more tactical problems. This is a short sim for new employees learning how to evaluate passport applications, and it can take you through. But again, using the same short sim format, you can examine documents, you can move them around, and again, very, very cost effectively, giving people real life skills, real life practice, which is again how they develop mental models on one hand, and on the other hand, how they prepare for jobs. So again, typical example. And here's sort of one more on goal setting. I'll take you through this one. So in this case, one of the mental models is goal setting. So this is sim on goal setting. In this case, let's call you a high school student, and you want to do great things in your life. The first thing what you're going to want to do is set yourself a big goal. You want to give yourself a giant goal. So the way that this process works is the first thing you do is you come up with a giant stretch goal. Wow, under 2-hour marathon, something incredibly insane, but just to free up your mind. And then you fan out, and then you look at all the little goals underneath that, and then you figure out the time commitments it takes to do that. And then what you do is you literally say, I'm going to commit to one of these things or none. I'm going to find one level in this fan to find out, what's the right goal for me to do. And then in this case, anyway, so that's just how that sim works. So the philosophy of short sims, again, this is done in TalkMaster, is you have a setting, you have right ways, you have common mistakes where people can make the decisions that can either lead them down a bad path of the common mistake or the right way, and then going through it. So the very clean model, this is the short sim model where you might have several levels, and each time you're going through and making a bunch of decisions, you're seeing the context of the skill in a way that you're doing it very, very experientially. And so if you take my work, I have a workshop which is available on www.shortsims.com. And this is one thing you learn how to do is use a worksheet like this to break out each of your levels, brief descriptions, success, failure, right ways of doing things. So there's 2 big thoughts: heroic learning, which is a top-down philosophy of reorganizing, feeding the heroes, making self-managing generative communities the norm. And then also short sims, which is how do we deliver these mental models? How do we teach mental models and experiential learning, not just a bunch of facts? And also, the best way of creating a comfort level with short sims is obviously doing them. And we certainly have some workshops and custom short sims available on my site, Short Sims. Okay, any questions?
Yeah. Just 2 of them, basically, but I think they're quite important. So when you mentioned heroic communities, not LCDs, did you mean learning community development?
Oh, I'm sorry. LCD is lowest common denominator. I apologize. So
Okay,
it's how do we? Thank you. Great question. How do we? It's not anti-learning communities at all. It's how do we create? How do you aim for the most heroic people? And by the way, heroic is not a matter of how smart you are. It's almost the
exactly.
opposite of that. It's a matter of how you're approaching the day. How are you approaching each other? A notion of how attuned are you to your own individual heroic journey, and how have you aligned your heroic journey with the organization that you're in. So this is not, oh, you went to Harvard, or oh, you went to
Exactly.
Yale. It's not a matter of what your IQ is. It's a matter of how you're approaching the day, and how you're approaching your organization's challenges and your challenges.
So true. So you're not looking at the ones who are lagging behind, but you're looking at the ones who are driving and motivating the rest of the
Right,
team.
and providing environments where a lot of people who are on the fence. So once you start having some heroic communities, you'll start realizing that a lot of people who are on the fence want to gravitate towards it, and over time, more and more people who used to be on the fence start becoming heroes themselves, and it's very exciting to see.
Exactly. Clark, may I ask you to give a very short answer, maybe one or two phrases, because we will need to move on. But that is a very important question. So, what did motivate you to research this topic in the first place?
I think education is broken. I think we're doing everything wrong. I think
Mm,
instructional design is a
mm,
nightmare of
mm.
shoving content at people we don't like, and we don't trust, in a way that I think is totally ineffective. So everything I've been doing for the last 20 years, including short sims and heroic learning, is how do we rediscover growing in education, and how do we get rid of all of this old stuff that's absolutely a failure and that's holding us back.
Thank you, Clark. That is actually very helpful. There is one more question about the resources that you can recommend on creating short sims, but if you would be so kind, maybe you could just stay with us for several more minutes and leave a comment in the chat later on YouTube here with us. Or maybe you prefer to stay a little longer and listen to the other speakers, because I'm sure we're going to see each other again during a roundtable. But
I look forward to it.
yeah, looking forward to that exactly. Thank you so much, Clark. I
Thank you.